Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm Victor Smith. Tonight, we have a long list of topics.
Not really.
Not really. We will be discussing the Supreme Court decision Egbert v. Boule, which tells you that you cannot sue a Border Patrol agent for excessive use of force, and why they decided to release that instead of Dobbs, which is more important. Before that, we will discuss the January 6th hearing that took place last night in Lifetime and the fallout from that. But first, we will discuss our intellectual topic. If you were a local noble, how would you run your lands? This is from question of the day that we asked on May 25th. If you were a local noble in charge of a modern city, county, or metropolitan area, how would you run it? This includes everything from laws to economics to zoning to basically everything else. And first, we will make brief mention that today, as we are recording this, Friday, June 10, is White Rose Day, which is the birthday of James the Old Pretender, the son of King James II of, well, I'll just say Great Britain for the purpose of simplicity.
I reject that notion. It's England, Scotland, and Ireland. Anyways.
Okay. Let us go into the actual question here.
And I think that we should let our our guest host answer first, because why not?
Hello.
Hello. You may know this guy.
My name is the Counter Revolution. I am the guest here today. It is an honor to be amongst fellow intellectuals.
We're very dangerous.
Yes, very dangerous indeed. As someone who lives in a land of nobles, I think if I was to put myself in a situation where I was like a duke of some place or a local noble, I suppose I wouldn't really have too much of a hands-on experience ruling my area. I think I would let people be aware of my presence and be more of a cultural figurehead than one that rules with more of an iron fist. Much like how Her Majesty runs the country today, I think I would delegate a lot of my responsibilities to my officials and whatnot, because a single man cannot run a country alone, as you know.
All right. Very short. I am sort of the antithesis of that. Now, I would probably say first that I would probably never be a noble. With some guys like, hey, do you want to be ennobled? I would say probably not. But I think that when it comes to governing a city, there are some unique challenges, because let's take New York, for example. I guess we would have to define exactly what we mean by a city, in the sense, because the way you're going to govern something like New York is obviously going to be different than how you would govern, I don't know, Bay City in Michigan.
Some outpost in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So because New York City has a population greater than a couple of the states and a couple small countries. So
yeah.
So there was a giant mayor's conference, and it was all representative of population. The mayor of New York would just be sitting at a table unto himself, like maybe in Peking. But anyways, so I think that there would be some delegating of power, but especially in a larger city. But it's not so much that the power is just forever and always given over to other people. I think that a lot of that delegating of responsibility is just because there are so many things that you had to do. You had to have somebody help draft the laws. However, the ruler would ultimately be in charge. The noble would ultimately be in charge. But he would have to, especially in a larger city, get a lot of input from the people he's ruling over. And this is something that I've been thinking about earlier today over what would be an ideal form of city government specifically. And getting input when it comes to laws, like let's say the city is considering updating its electrical code. Obviously, the noble who's in charge of the city, unless that's his pastime, which I don't know, could be. His pastime is an electrician. You know, he's probably not going to know a whole lot about that. So somebody says, "Hey, we need to do da 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 da," and so out of custom, the noble would say, "Okay, let's get some actual electricians in our city and see. Hey, is this a good thing?" And they might say, "No, this guy's crazy. Does he want to burn the place down?" And then you find out he's a serial arsonist, and then they lock him up, and that's the end of that hypothetical. Um,
Wow.
but no, I feel like as terms of specifics, it really does depend on where it is. I mean, historically, cities were.
Let's suppose for the sake of this particular argument, let's actually do get into specific localities here. So, Charles, why not make yourself the ruler of your locality, and you can tell us how you would rule it.
Oh well. All right. So my city is a typical Midwestern town of a rapidly declining population that could fit inside some stadiums. Although, in fairness, some of those stadiums are just too big for their to exist. No. So, well, with my town in particular, we're assuming a glorious monarchist or noble, institution across all the U.S. just suddenly exists. We have a lot of debt, so austerity is going to have to be a defining mark for a while. And secondly, ways of raising capital, obviously getting in companies would be, but it wouldn't just be economic, because, and this is another thing that I think all cities have to have, or all communities have to have. They do have to have a strong religious base. Now, obviously, my Catholicism is something that's brought up in almost every episode. But the city must, as a cultural unifier, the Catholicism of the city would be important. And the wards could be, especially in larger cities, wards could be divided based off what parish you live in. So I'm in the jurisdiction of Saint, I don't know, Bridget. I don't think there's even there's a Saint Bridget in Dublin, Ireland. I've been there, or maybe not. But anyways, so I'm in the jurisdiction of this parish, or I'm in the jurisdiction of that parish, and that's where the wards are drawn, and that sort of gives a nice cultural thing, where people feel like they're part of that ward, and it ties them more towards that particular area of the city. Because one of the unique challenges of city living is that if you're a farmer, you're going to be tied to that piece of land for generations, But if you're in a city, typically, you're in an apartment, and then you're in a house, maybe in the more suburban area, and then your kids move somewhere else, and then, you might move somewhere else in your retirement. Even if you stay in the same town, you're generally not going to be in the same physical spot of that town. So there has to be something to build up a culture, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges to urban environments to begin with. So yeah. What was I gonna say? What? I've waffled on too long.
Yes,
Essentially, but
you have.
I will just say guilds would also be a part of it, and maybe somebody else will bring that up, and then I can explain what I mean later. But I have spent way too much time, so I'll let Victor discuss how he would rule Baltimore or something.
Okay,
Wait,
I'm
would the fact that you're a Jacobite influence anything?
Well, in the sense that authority, as assuming we're in the glorious Jacobite monarchy, obviously
Definitely
all
not.
authority is vested, all temporal authority is vested in the king, but actual power is diffused to the localist levels possible. So, in that sense, that I would have a lot more authority than, say, a mayor. The city government, whether it's me or my advisors and the guilds or whatever, would have a lot more authority than a current mayor in the U.S. has. So I guess in that sense, it would influence it. Because that's sort of the opposite of what we have. Because in the United States, technically, authority is very decentralized, but power is very concentrated. Because sadness.
All right, and with Baltimore, Baltimore is very, shall we say, tricky to fix. But if Will can give me a link to my response to the question when it was originally posed back in late May, I would appreciate it so that I can refer back to it.
Fine.
But basically, what I said was we've got to improve the education system. That is priority number one. Because there are schools in Baltimore City. Now I'm taking both the city and the county just for transparency's sake. I am assuming that I have both city and county. For those of you that are pedants out there, the Baltimore City schools are essentially the most corrupt institution in the entire education sphere of America. Baltimore City has had, let me just give you one example. A student at Augusta Fells Savage High School, or I don't know what it's basically called, but he was a senior. He was towards the middle of his class with a .02 or .08. It's been a while since I read the story, but I like a .08 or some minuscule number GPA, and he was ranked in the middle of his class. His mother is a single mother of three, or I think it's actually two, but he has to work 3 jobs to support her children. And the school sent a letter home saying that her son would have to start all over. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, thank you very much to Will for getting me my comments. So, my first bullet point is, and I quote, fire every single member of the Baltimore City Department of Education and replace them with either someone from the county or someone from the outside to take their position. The Baltimore City Department of Education is one of the highest funded departments of education of any large city in America. And the schools are failing big time. Like big time, big time. Close the related school due to poor performance. The Augusta Fells Savage High School, I would close that due to poor performance because of the stuff that I've seen. Oh, and by the way, there was also pressure from administrations to bump people's grades up, to bump people to the next level so they can lie about graduation rates.
Got away with that?
Apparently so. And my third bullet point, which is also part of the education thing, expand the Baltimore County school bus system to encompass Baltimore City as well, because in Baltimore City there is no yellow school bus system. And I know that our British co-host has no idea what I'm talking about here, but just bear with me.
I mean, I've seen it in popular media, big old yellow buses.
Yeah, remember we basically wrecked their cultural perception. All their cool shows were from the 70s and before.
Well, okay, so
Yeah.
in Baltimore City, if you want to get to school, you have to take the regular public transit that everybody else does.
What could go wrong?
Oh no.
Number 4, work with an HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, air conditioning company, to get a modern system, basically heating and air conditioning system for every single school, every single public school in the combined area. Now, I know that it's going to take a lot of time to do. It's going to take more than just the summer because it's complicated. But to accommodate this, on the year that I would have it done, on that year, I would start like actually going to school in, let's say, after Christmas break and finish off the school year in school regularly. And for the first half of the school year, unfortunately, as much as I absolutely hate and detest this, do online school so that from the end of the previous school year until January, we can get all of the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems into the school so that we can run more smoothly. Because there are some schools in Baltimore City that close due to it being too hot or too cold. I'm not kidding.
The joys of living in technically the South.
Number 5, revamp the curriculum to basically take a lot of the political bias out of education as possible. My cohorts can tell you more about that because I actually went to school too early for there to be this issue. Number 6, bring back the enforcement of the petty crimes that Mosby has been ignoring and essentially give my full assistance to prosecuting Marilyn Mosby to full extent of the law. If you don't know who Marilyn Mosby is, she is the wife of City Council President Ben Mosby, or I don't know what his name, Nick Mosby. She is the wife to City Council President Nick Mosby, and she is also the city's state's attorney, the top prosecutor in the city. She is corrupt to the core. Number 7, build and maintain community centers for the kids to play in so they don't have the automatic incentive to join a crime gang. That is a major issue in the city of Baltimore. A major issue.
Quite similar to what we have over here, actually.
All right. I look forward to hearing that. Number 8, offer rewards to people in excess of what they would be paid for a, quote, job of a street gang to out members of said gangs and leaders, etc. Number 9, which I know that everybody else is going to want to comment on, so I'm going to say number 10 as well as number 9. Green spaces. Build and preserve lots of green spaces. And 10, root out all corrupt actors from the public sector in the combined area. I know, easier said than done. So, I will allow you all now to comment on my long 10-point list. I could have given you a 50-point list, and it still wouldn't be enough to fix the issues in Baltimore.
Well, most of those are education, which is good. I think that we should do an education intellectual topic at some point in the future. But yeah, I think localizing education and getting the parents more involved would help with that. But green spaces, I do support green spaces. I think that they are a necessity. I think that that your city, if it needs to be naturally beautiful, and the man-made stuff needs to be beautiful, because there's nothing more, as I said before, there's nothing more depressing than a city block of modern terrible architecture.
my God,
Like
yeah.
why? Shoot, what's the show? The Bob Newhart show. Some of it's a little iffy, but it was before TV really got really bad with that kind of stuff. But the intro, which is him going home from work or whatever, you see like downtown Chicago, and everything is all gray and disgusting, and these buildings are terrible. Okay, nuke 50, well, not nuke, but tear down like half of them. Put a little bit of grass my voice. Put a little bit of grass somewhere, and then tear down the rest and replace them with buildings that you actually want to look at, as opposed to buildings you have to look at. Like, maybe the real reason everyone's necks are facing down isn't because they're looking at their cell phones. It's because they can't stand to look at the building, so the concrete sidewalk looks better. Okay, it's probably the cell phones, but
That is like, that's literally me whenever I travel to certain parts of London. The buildings there are just god ugly.
yeah, I mean,
monstrosity in the middle of the city that they called a shard.
It is actually the most horrendous building.
I mean, in defense of that building, it does look like where an evil supervillain would totally hide out.
An evil
So
supervillain would totally hide out in London.
yeah, it's just so, I don't know. London hurts because there are some streets that obviously I've never been, but there's some streets that are beautiful and whatnot, and then there are just others that are terrible, and it's like the city has been around since it's older than the concept of England itself, and this is what you get.
Yeah, it's just been ruined, honestly. Modern architects, but let's get back on track.
Yeah. Let's see who else has comments for Victor's glorious plan.
You go first, Will.
Wait, who's going first?
You.
The point about the school bus thing, which I agree that expansion needs to be done, but it doesn't necessarily need to be segregated between public transportation and the school buses, because the idea of a school bus is actually only really the norm in the U.S., Canada, and maybe a couple other countries. But like in Japan, for example, it is normal for students to use the public transportation. But of course, that goes back to the other issue of the U.S., which is very.
Well, the thing is, you need a robust public transportation system before you can even think doing that. And currently, I don't think anywhere in America has as robust public transportation.
Getting ready to comment, that goes back to the other problem in U.S. cities that is endemic, and that is public transportation in our country. Because at some point, General Motors and the rest of the car company said, you know what would be a great idea? Making a world where everyone is dependent on personal automobiles, and if they can't afford an automobile, you are screwed, and that is your fault for being poor.
What if you wanted to take your city's cool-looking tram system, but GM said drive?
And now we're $5 a gallon because we reap what we sow.
And of course, if anybody wants to have fun and go to mta.maryland.gov and attempt to plan a route from a certain random location to another random location in the Baltimore metropolitan area, and then go to Google Maps and figure out how long it takes to drive that distance yourself, you'll see how sometimes the Maryland public transit system is incredibly inefficient.
Well,
yeah, I think you and I actually had that conversation when I first posted the question, because if I remember correctly, this is my question.
Yes, it was yours.
Oh, well,
I think we had that conversation actually, and yeah, it was definitely interesting. You showed me the site and everything, and we sat down and talked about just how absurd it was trying to get around Baltimore by bus.
Oh, okay, so your Maryland's MTA stands for Maryland Transportation Authority.
Yes.
Okay, well, it's going back to the Midwest.
What trip?
MTA used to stand for Meyer Thrifty Acres. They've since dropped that title, but I find that noteworthy.
Okay.
Our MTA is much better than your MTA. Is all I'm trying to say.
Who is next?
I guess
That would
counter
be, that
revolution.
would be, that would actually, I think that would be Counter Revolution's time. You are now the Duke of Kent with authority to fix Kent. How do you fix Kent? And then we will go to Will.
Yes, one thing that you listed that resonated with me the most, that I think both the States and the UK have in common with, is in relation to youth centres, because a lot of the youth in the UK are becoming brainwashed almost with this idea of, you know, the idea of this romantic criminal lifestyle, you know, especially in London where it's worse, because like whilst some people will say America has a gun problem, in the UK it's knives, and like it's very easy to get your hands on knives here. And so what we need over here is more investment in youth centres, because it is very endemic. Like there's a statue in London somewhere of like an angel, I believe, just made out of all the knives that have been collected off young gangsters over here, and like they just don't have any futures because they just can't see the future. And it is because London right now is controlled by a left-leaning administration, and they don't seem to care. They just don't really seem to care at all. They care more about, you know, the message than, you know, actually carrying out anything that they say they'll do, but they just care about how they look. And so it resonated with me the most when you say that, and I would fix that by I would fix that by investing more in one, better education, like you said, investigating school boards for corruption, because I feel as if they get away with far too much nowadays. And then I would look to invest more in areas of youth clubs, youth centres, giving kids, like, you know, hope for the future instead of romanticizing them into living life of drugs, which, you know, modern left-leaning media has created for them. So I would, if I was a petty, if not a petty noble, if I was a noble, I would see that the next generation, which I belong to, funnily enough, um, would would see the light at the end of the tunnel in a way.
Well,
A
actually,
a Premier League team in Kent would go a long way to that, obviously, because football is the big sport over there.
well,
Yes.
Well, actually, as sort of a counterpoint to that, tying that into what I said, that the church needs to be involved. One of the things, and I don't know if this is just an American thing, but I can't imagine it was only an American thing. Different parishes, in a way, were sort of like the youth clubs, because you would have parish basketball teams and parish different sports teams that would face off against each other in friendly areas, and a parish has the potential to be not just a just a youth club, but also a club where everybody from the parish can come together on certain things. So it would also help kids, be in more situations, with healthy adults. Um, and so that's good. Nowadays, of course, the extent of your parish interaction is just coffee and donuts after mass on Sundays normally, which is unfortunate, especially if you've realized the impact sugar can have and you don't want to die. So you can't. So it's either eat very sugary donut and then eat a couple other things and then not be able to have pop, and then you have pop for breakfast, and then you're like, shoot, I can't have pop anymore because that's 70% of your daily recommended value of sugar. Can we talk about food sometime? Like maybe not next week, but sometime. Can we just talk about how ridiculous our food is if you actually look at the stupid nutrition labels?
Yeah, I could be down to talk about food.
Anyways, so yeah, all I'm saying, parishes, they sort of fill that place of helping socialize kids, and also neighborhoods need to start like throwing block parties or something again, and essentially build community, like not just necessarily dedicated community centers, but overall give kids a place to socialize under adult supervision in a healthy way. Because obviously, if El Chapo is the adult supervising them, that's not going to be healthy. But yeah,
Yeah, that's the one thing. That's another thing I actually quite envy about the States compared to here, because in the UK it's we're quite an antisocial bunch, and we don't often hold those kind of events, which is unfortunate. Which is like why when I visit the States, I want to get involved in the social aspect of it all. What you were saying about the parishes, yeah, I totally get behind that. I've never really been much of a religious man myself, but I definitely encourage that because I feel a place like a parish or a place of religious worship would definitely encourage a more social atmosphere, and I would be more than happy to. I'd be more than happy to endorse that.
right now Will has to fix. He's probably, is he the small? I don't know. Maybe it's John, but I think Will. You live in the smallest city of us all.
Depends on where John lives in Louisiana. Yeah, if he's how far out in the swamp are you?
Bro, we are not a swamp. This is what I love. Like, everybody thinks Louisiana is just one, like, big swamp. We are below sea level. Like, usually you'll run into... So, I believe it's I-10. That's like up here.
A little bit, bud. Sorry.
It's 4.
Yeah, your wife, your
Yeah, it's basically the belt, like stuff like that. So we have a lot of swamps down here. Here.
All right, so let's go to Will because we've been having issues with John.
John's Wi-Fi.
Okay, so Will, go ahead.
Okay, so much like my compatriot Charles, I too live in a Rust Belt wasteland in the Midwest where
One
there's
struggle.
no money and there's no hope for tomorrow because Reagan said the free market is the best way and all the jobs went to China. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but being in the Midwest and being in a small town in the Midwest, you're addressed with a lot of problems that aren't just financial. There's a lot of urban blight, there's a lot of issues with wealth disparity and issues between the poorer parts of the city and the richer parts in the city. And I personally, I have a very staunch opinion that is kind of controversial in the US, and that is I'm a staunch urbanist. That means I hate NIMBYs, I hate suburbia, I hate the culture that surrounds it. Love me dense cities, love my public transportation, love my walkability. Simple as. And so,
And during our conversation about the Maryland Transit Authority, it is ridiculously hard for me that lives 2 minutes, like not literally like a couple of minutes away from the Baltimore City, Baltimore County line on the county side to access public transportation.
yeah, and that is absurd. And if you live in like a super rural city, not having access to public transportation, like if you live in a town with 500 people, your town to have a bus route. But if you live in a town with 500 people, I don't expect you to really need to drive around it either. Your town should be small enough to walk around. But the problem in the U.S. is, ever since the 50s, the U.S. has been obsessed with this idea that cities need to be entirely built of single-use zoning, single-family homes, and that the city needs to be so segregated into different districts and classes and such that it doesn't work, and that getting around a U.S. city is near impossible. So the first thing I would do is fix the infrastructure and layout of the roads in my town. And my town has a unique issue. We used to have a major U.S. highway that ran through it, U.S. Route 23, that runs all the way from Detroit all the way down south to Florida, used to run straight through my town. As a result, we have a lot of boulevards and avenues that go through the middle of the city, and most of them are one way for no reason at all. It's not like the traffic through town justifies it. If anything, the traffic makes it worse with the one ways, because if you're trying to get through downtown and you miss your turn, you have to go all the way around downtown to catch the one way and go all the way back around to get your turn. It's stupid.
I think Midal said that one ways were just in style for a while. That city planners had this idea that the one way was more efficient. I mean, I guess it's safer than a traditional.
I don't know if it's safer, but one time I saw someone driving the wrong ways down the one way, and you knew they knew what they were doing because they also turned the wrong way onto the next one way when they were done going the wrong way on a one way. So like they were going south on a northbound one way, and then they turned right to go west on an eastbound one way. I watched that happen. It was the most insane thing I have ever witnessed.
It's time for this week's episode of the Monarchist of America drinking game. Take a shot every time Will says one way. We can't promise your liver will survive.
We're not responsible for any liver failure or alcohol poisoning. Anyway, the other thing I would do, and I understand this might be a controversial opinion in here, is once I figure stabilize the budget, put higher taxes on the suburbs in order to actually pay for the cost of maintaining the suburbs, because interesting fact, despite the fact that they have a higher property tax base, suburbs actually cost more than what they make, because maintaining the infrastructure, the water pipes, the roads and such, to make sure that the suburbs have proper infrastructure actually costs more than what they make. But anyway, after balancing the budget and getting proper funding, I would start making immediate plans to enforce eminent domain on some of the hundreds of abandoned factories. Of course, I'm over exaggerating when I'm saying hundreds, but there are still too many. There are at least 5 within 1 mile of the city center, and these are eyesores. These buildings have been rotting forever, since before I was born. And I would use eminent domain to seize the land and begin planning demolition, so these relics of the past, these relics of an industrial era that no longer exists, can be removed in order to make actual use of the land, like building more housing or making room for local businesses or parks or recreation.
Well,
Something that's actually going to pump value into the town instead of making it look like a rotting husk of a city that actually used to mean something.
Well, I'm not sure that I would go so far as employing eminent domain. I mean, I would say I would just offer to buy it from uh the people, and you know, if
Well, that's actually what eminent domain
well,
has to do. If a city enforces eminent domain, they have to pay a reasonable price.
well, yeah, they have to pay market value, but let's see. I think it was who wrote the in the 40th year. It was the commentary on it was the encyclical talking about the encyclical Rerum Novarum. Well, essentially it said that just because the land goes unused doesn't necessarily mean that the person loses their right to it. Although I'm not sure if I can't remember which pope it was just talking about individual, like, you know, families or whatnot, or if he actually meant the corporations that still own the land. But either way, corporations, just donate the land to your city if you have no intention on using it in the near future.
Anyway,
Or donate it to like some
So
housing company.
other thing,
well, of course, those corporations might not even know that that factory still exists.
It would be funny if the city comes to, I don't know, DuPont with an ultimatum that says, give us this factory or we're gonna take it. And DuPont says, who are you? Sure, I guess. I don't...
apologize for the technical difficulties. We lost recording, but anyway, I was discussing minibuses and public transportation when the bot cut out. My city has minibuses. They're like small vans, similar to the size of those trailers or campers you see, where it's an RV and it has the truck up front and a small camper in the back. Anyway, these buses are very small, they're very efficient, and they make sense for a town my size. The problem is the way we run our bus route involves treating the route as if it's a taxi service rather than a formal bus route. And frankly, the idea that you have to call a bus in order to get a bus ride is absurd. And it really messes with accessibility in the city.
I had to do that with the MTA's mobility bus service, which is for the disabled. But of course, that's door to door. Of course, that's door to door service. By default, that's not a regular bus.
Right, and I will be honest, the disabled in the community do use the MAT bus more than most other people in the community. Most people drive because it's the US, of course, everyone drives everywhere. But the purpose is it's not an exclusive service for the disabled, and since that's the case, the rest of the population should have a reliable access to a bus service as well. And having reliable access to a bus service would cut down on a lot of the traffic issues I've previously stated with the one ways, and the other big issue with my town is the train. My city grew up around a major train junction, and basically every major train service from CSX to Union Pacific to Norfolk Southern, etc., owns to some degree a stake in being able to traverse through the town because it is so essential. And especially in my case, because my work is right next to the rail lines, it makes getting to work a nightmare. So the other thing I would do after enforcing eminent domain, fixing public transportation and infrastructure, is I would start building pedestrian walkways and expand upon ways to bypass the trains so that the trains can move uninterrupted and people can get where they need to be without having to worry about getting stuck by a train. It's so bad it affects emergency response. We have a fire station right across the railroad tracks, right next to my work, but they answer calls all across the county and all across the city. And if there's a train that's stopped on the tracks and it's waiting to get right away, they have to go all the way out into the county and all the way around in order to get into the city. It's insane. And so my city overall, it needs a lot of love. It definitely needs a facelift. It has a ton of problems. I'm not even getting into the problems with crime and stuff. But in order to fix the problems with crime, we need to get ample opportunity into the city and basically save it from slowly decaying and dying because, like most problems in the Rust Belt, it comes back to the fact that our cities are neglected, they're forgotten, and the condition economically, socially, and politically is that of basically withering away into nothingness for a region that once meant something, but the US has basically forgotten because we've outlived our use in a post-industrial era. Any questions?
I think that's a very good point to make when it comes to certain towns. West Virginia, in West Virginia, there is a huge drug problem because the mines have closed and nobody wants to live out there anymore. And people feel trapped.
The greatest mistake we made with West Virginia is creating an economy that's entirely dependent on coal mining. I hate it when the GOP says, well, think about the coal miners, because that's not an excuse. We can't just keep propping up the coal mining industry just because these people are dependent on it. It's not their fault that we created a system where they're only dependent for being relevant based off of one industry. That's our failures. We shouldn't prop up the coal mining industry just to keep them going. We need to create new ways to revitalize these communities.
I guess the question is like, well, what do you do with the miners once they are out of work then?
Yeah, I mean, the fact remains is that, I mean, a guy in a field can be a guy in a field and be mostly self-sufficient. I mean, obviously he's going to need some, industrial assistance if he wants to be the most efficient, like with plows and such. But a city, I think that a city actually has to have something, like some sort of industry, in order to be relevant or be a center of commerce like New York, because you can't just have an economy that's based off everybody everywhere Silicon Valley. A computer, a computer in every house, and a phone in every pocket. That'd be terrible. Oh wait, that's the future we have now.
Well,
Yeah.
what my city at least has going for it right now is, well, Ohio's been blessed by the Japanese in that Honda has invested a ton of capital into our state and made it a major center for manufacturing their small to medium-sized vehicles out of Marysville. But parts suppliers and people commute to work in Marysville, or plants that produce the parts that end up making the cars as the final product. My city is also home to Whirlpool's sole dryer manufacturing facility, of which I am an employee of. I wouldn't say a proud employee because I'm not necessarily fond of my job working the assembly line, but they pay for my college, so I can't complain too much.
Do you have a political or a political small political group discount? Like a family discount, except it's for your friends and a small fringe political movement. Because
No
we kind of need a new dryer.
employee discount.
Let's not bug him with that.
I know,
Let's
I'm joking.
I do have
let's actually
Do they ship to Britain?
shame Ford, the GM conglomerate, and Dodge for allowing Honda, of all companies, Honda, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean.
Here's the fun part. That Japanese Honda Civic that is technically considered by most people to be a silly foreign car is actually more made in American than anything Ford has produced in a very, very long time. And
Yeah.
that should be sad and ridiculed.
Oh, Ford, do you hear that?
Well-
Japanese cars are more American than yours.
And
You need to fix that now.
Well, I mean, at least it's not Mitsubishi, because that would be awkward considering what they made during the war.
Oh, Mitsubishi makes a ton of stuff in the USA too.
Okay. I mean, obviously that's water under the bridge, but imagine your great grandfather was strafed by a Japanese Zero, and now you're working at a Mitsubishi plant.
Honda uses
All comes full circle.
exclusively Mitsubishi electronics and PLCs to run their assembly lines and systems. Mitsubishi is alive and well in the US. Toyota is alive and well in the US. Honda, God bless their souls, is alive and well in the US. And I think the Japanese really like the US because the Japanese are also staunchly anti-union. So there's a bit of a, I guess you could say, like-minded
It's true.
corporate America and corporate Japan. and that they really, really, really dislike pro-labor movements.
Yeah, and
Spelled
I would say,
Labour.
so I would say that's true. But I will also point out that Ford, yes, Ford has made a paint scheme for the Ford Bronco that has a rainbow on it.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily relevant to this discussion, but like,
Care that it's Pride Month? I just want to know, why would you ever put a rainbow colored scheme on a car? That's almost worse than painting a car lime green. I don't
okay.
political
It's like
state.
you're being chased by LGBTQ.
It's
It's just
no,
waste.
I know this isn't a Pride Month discussion, but like, I just really wish the companies would stop with putting the rainbow flag on everything. I was telling Vic earlier this week how it was funny. I think Glad or somebody they've had they make, of course, disposable plates, paper plates, which is another matter. But they put the pride flag on it, and I mean, at least it's funny that you're putting it on something that's intentionally disposable. But still, I would rather not have to boycott every single company that's known by more than 15 people. Please.
No.
I would like to be able to go to the store and just shop with a clean conscience and know that I'm not supporting people who support evil. Maybe, I don't know. Please.
One
We
thing,
will move on from that particular
Discussion
discuss.
back to
Yeah.
Will and then to John with his town in the bayou.
but anyway, I actually, on a final note, after fixing public transportation or anything, one thing I would do is, after demolishing all of the factories, because a lot of these factories are really old. They're not made of concrete or steel. They're made of brick. They're factories from the mid to late 1800s. These are Victorian era factories that were basically left to decay and rot. And what I would do is, I would have them demolished in such a way that the brick is salvageable, and we can use the bricks to replace the sidewalks or
Well,
build new buildings. Actually use the bricks for something useful in the town to beautify the city.
I don't know how feasible this is, but what do you call it? Shit, what was I gonna
One
say?
thing.
If the actual factories aren't necessarily too far gone, to be used, you might want to turn one of those, at least the older ones, like the ones that they're actually Victorian, into maybe a place for the county historical society or the town historical society. I think also, or maybe it's just that it looks like it. I think also up in Frankenmuth, Michigan, there was a factory that they turned into a brewery, but the brewery may have always just looked like a factory. I can't remember. I don't know specifically, but more microbreweries everywhere. We will outpace the Germans.
Well,
Yeah.
that is the problem. They are actually owned by the Historical Society, a lot of them. In the Historical Society, I don't know if it's because they don't have proper funding or if they just care about actually having the building, they care about taking care of maintaining the.
I think they care about actually having the buildings up.
Yeah,
Well,
but I don't know what condition they're like on the inside. But I know the shovel company, the steam shovel company's old corporate office has all the windows busted out. The blinds are falling down. The buildings have been abandoned since almost 5, 6 years before I was born. And I don't know what kind of condition they are on the inside, but they're probably not good, or they're probably not safe. And of course, there's issues with pollution or other thing. These buildings probably aren't asbestos free either.
well,
And with all that in mind, it probably would be cheaper to just tear them down and replace them with something new than to actually try and rebuild and revitalize.
How about, here's an idea. How about a museum dedicated to what was going on in those factories?
We
Well,
actually have one already. We have the Huber Museum for the Huber Company. It's in our fairgrounds.
well,
And
Give
we
it, you
have a
could give it some
museum.
refurbishment. You could turn it into a something like a parish, maybe.
well,
Eh,
yeah, well,
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe
yeah,
you'd have to make it.
well,
You'd have to make it look pretty on the outside first, I think.
I mean, that gets into a whole other discussion because traditionally Catholic architecture was always built in such a way that the parish itself, its shape should be a certain way, and I highly doubt that
Yeah.
people are making factories. But yeah, it is a shame though when you have buildings that look so beautiful. There's actually a high school in my area that people were considering purchasing and turning into a high school, but they didn't want the city didn't want to sell it, and then a few years later, since they didn't do anything with it, you can't do anything with it, and it has to be torn down. But apparently, it was really beautiful, like all hardwood floors, and it was brick. It was sort of I don't know if it was just in my area, but all the schools, whether they were Catholic or not, built between, I guess, the it built in like the 30s. Um, they all had the same general style, and it looked pretty good. A lot of course, one of those schools recently burned down, and then
We have we had a couple
I mean,
old
it's
in my town too. One of them got tore down when I was really young. A couple of them got converted, but the old high school is now the middle school, and we built a new high school. There's definitely a lot of history and a lot of potential in my town, but there's also a lot of things that have been neglected so long that there's no saving or salvaging. Like there's also a row of old shops or businesses that line one of the railroad tracks off of Main Street. And obviously when the railroad stopped in the city and when we have passenger trains stopping in the city, those were storefronts because people would get off the train and they'd be right there to go to the stores, but now they're just boarded up, walled up, bricked, and the roofs are caved in and everything. And so
Alright, let's bring John in now. John, how would you fix your town?
uh, well, I don't really. I don't want to say my town, but let's just town is a college. So if I were to be a noble or a ruler of this town, um, the first thing I would do is to try to become a patron of the university. And I'm already a member of the university student base, so I would just assume to be, the patron of the college. And then the weird thing about it is because it's kind of an awkward space for me because I am planning on being a priest one day, so it's kind of a weird thing to be. So maybe I don't know, priest, or bishop, prince, bishop, whatever. But needless to say, I would be the patron of the university, try to at least. And the second thing would be to get together as much expertise and uh, different voices as I possibly could and figure out how to solve the issues of the town. This town has many water issues. I believe Will was talking about that. We have a lot of water problems. Our water rusts, things like that, and yeah, that's a huge problem down here. So I would try and figure out how to mediate that and uh, figure figure how to do that. And additionally, I would try and revamp the educational system of the town. So, or try to at least as much. I guess this all depends on whether or not uh, federal law regarding like schools needs to be enforced currently. Because if it's not enforced, I would completely try and revamp it to more, I guess, not modern, but more, guess, evolved ways of teaching and stuff like that, and really try and figure out how to better, you know, develop these kids better. I would probably see about implementing universal pre-K and stuff like that. Try and get kids learning faster and stuff like that. And another thing I try and do is try and get operation around the area. See if start schools. See if I could support them in starting a school and stuff and provide more diversity avenue. And then I would I would try and revamp, because basically how a civilization continues is the children. So a society, you start with revamping the students or with the schools. So that's where I would go, and then I would support the churches and see if implementing tax. Well, of course, tax exempt status is already done. Try and get them, help them be more charity minded in this little town. So I guess enable them to establish soup kitchens, places for homeless people to sleep, and all that stuff. So try and get that in, and then I would have like on the outskirts. I would because this area has a lot of farms on the outskirts. So what I would do with that is try and see if I could get co-ops going, see if I could fund co-ops and stuff like that, to see kind of implement kind of guild and distributist things on the outskirts, in downtown, in the city proper. I would see about kind of trying to implement something between traditional like urban design and distributism, and try and figure out which works and how to develop that into the city. I don't really have that much knowledge on how to economically make something better, but that's why I brought the expertise in, the people that know what they're talking about in these instances. And that's what I would try and do. I would try and very much build up, okay, how do we make like limited technocracy or limited distributism work in the context of this town? What are the major industries of this town? So what do we need to worry about making into guilds? What do we need to implement in that as far as that's concerned? And if we're looking at a federal government that supports guilds, how do we make a guild and then uh, link it to different guilds across the nation and kind of see if we can get some more support coming into the town? And I would probably push eminent domain, especially with the corporations. If it's not a corporation, I would kind of say, okay, whoever, I would say, we'll give you as much as you want for it, but you're not using it right now. So stuff like that. And I would try and get eminent domain, probably. I think that would be a good thing, that especially in Louisiana, because you have a lot of like just abandoned towns, essentially. Like you have entire blocks of city change just completely abandoned. So I would want to like try and at least get these towns refurbished, and these houses kind of done up, hopefully, or replaced with something, or gardens or something like that. Because I definitely want to, and that leads into another thing, exploring other energy options, trying to get limited city energy independence, see if we can be as a self-sustainable town as we can be, and go from there and see, okay, after we've done everything we could, what do we need to bring in and what do we need to open up, and try and make the town as self-sufficient as humanly possible, and see if we can get some people from the college to stay after their tenure as members of this college, and go from there, and see if we can avoid brain drain or something like that. We don't want our intelligent people to leave. So
Okay, and your college, I just wanted to ask you about the college for a little
Yeah.
bit. What can you tell us about that college?
Well, I don't want to get into too much detail, but it is one of the fair because if I give anything away, it's probably going to be you're probably going to be able to tell, or people that are watching this will probably be able to tell. But it is it's not necessarily liberal arts, but it's kind of it is a more non-liberal arts minded college. So it's more of the economic side, the engineer side, the science minded side. But I will try and get people who are knowledgeable on history and stuff like that to see what probably most of the expertise would come from just that university alone, probably. But then, of course, like if we're starting co-ops, if we're trying to get farmers, get more farmers' rights and stuff like that, we would go to them and see how that works. But really, uh, being being a patron to the college, trying to revamp the water, try and get public transportation. Probably we don't have public transportation, but I would like some degree of public transportation because we're behind. Because in the South, we're behind you guys, like even further behind Europe. So I would want some, even if it's just a trolley system. I would say sure, and see if we could get that going. Anything to kind of liven up this southern town and kind of try and make it uh one step into the future and one step in the past. Try and be that link in between the two and really figure out, okay, how do we kind of make this town more green and self-sufficient, and at the same time how do we make it more connected to the southern past and to the culture around it, and really try and figure that stuff out. Of course, I'm not an economist, so I'm not really going to have any in-depth things about how to kind of economically make the city better. Um, but I will say that having a revamped water system, having self-sufficiency, having stuff like that is a big step forward in being
Thank you. Okay,
in.
thank you very much, John. I guess Counter Revolution has to go. So, Counter, do you have anything you'd like to say about the Order of Augustus? You're the head of media, so go ahead and plug the Order of Augustus on your way out. Please.
Yeah, yes. I am currently the head of media for the Order of Augustus, which is a similar organization, smaller, but it's slowly gaining traction. And do please come over and get engaged in the community because we would love to increase our engagement. I think it would be great. Definitely not trying to steal from you, from you fine gentlemen, of course. But yeah, and if and I being the head of media there, I design the graphics in the style that you have that some of you may have seen in the conference text chat. Uh, so please, if you don't be afraid to ask me if you have any ideas for designs that I could create for you. You don't have to pay me anything. Of course. And I'll see if I'll be able to help you there because ultimately, my goal is to spread monarchism as far as I possibly can to to make the world a better place. So yeah, so thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I'd also like to plug my YouTube channel of the same name.
Don't worry, we will include a link to that in the description, and I guess if we can get a permanent Discord link to the Order of Augustus, we can put that in the description.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I will send that to you when I can. I'll have a talk with our leader first.
Oh, I think.
All right, DM me. Okay.
Okay, so
Right.
Augusta
Okay,
is.
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, see ya.
Yeah.
See
Thank you
take care,
Thank you
God
very
bless,
much,
bye.
Counter. And now we welcome in
All right.
a
Goodbye,
more
everyone.
regular guest, Darth Calhoun. Perfect timing. Darth, let me pose this question to you now. You are the noble of your town. How do you run it? How do you fix it?
Well, one, I frankly don't know unless I would actually be on the ground having to deal with the day-to-day tasks, but I would deal with it as a true autocrat and be as personal about the decisions as I can instead of being as bureaucratic as I can. So essentially, I would make the calls. I would take the responsibilities. I would, in fact, try to also procure funds myself instead of having to levy the commoner and take away from his well-being to do so. So essentially, I'd rule like a noble in the feudal Middle Ages.
Very
Hey,
based.
so now we are going to invite Joe Capri up because I want to hear what he has to say on this particular topic. Joe, I think you can pull yourself up. I think you have the role to pull yourself up if that's...
He doesn't.
He doesn't?
I
Okay.
don't think.
Go ahead and... Oop. Okay, Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Joe, you are put in charge of your town. How do you run it?
I would probably get rid of the city manager and make the mayoral position more stronger. But other than that, I don't really think I can change much.
Okay, well, thank you for your candor, Joe. You can go back to the audience.
All right. Shoot. So did we all get a chance to express our views? Actually, though, historically, nobles didn't necessarily run towns directly, did they? That was more the guilds that ran
Yeah.
towns.
I would basically like it'd be me trying to get back basically part of the society. I would want to, because that's my outlook. Like I want to keep the things and restore the things that worked in the past, and I want to like develop and work on things that would work hopefully in the future. That's what I kind of want to bring it full circle in a way. It's kind of weird that like the modern society is kind of like, okay, there's one bad problem that's in the past. We need to completely destroy that and just keep and then just rebuild everything.
All right, now
I mean, as much as I would love to see the return to become the bureaucracies of the cities again, those mostly only happen in free cities. You see them a lot in the Holy Roman Empire, where you'd have imperial, you'd have a free city. In fact, like they were run by the emperor was the only one in charge of the city, so effectively the guilds were made the bureaucracy of the city, and they ran it like a guild does instead of like a bureaucracy does. They didn't levy taxes, instead they used the profits from their guild to actually do public projects and such.
Guilds were so based. They still are, but
all right, so okay, yeah. All right, so now I suppose if everyone's ready to move on, we have talked about this a great deal.
it gets the fun part, you know.
Yes, we get to the fun part where we get to discuss the stuff that actually happened. Last night in live time, there was a televised hearing from the January 6th Commission. And Will wanted to post something to our social media, and I will allow him to defend that here. He did not he hasn't posted it yet, to be clear.
Just did, actually.
He's 2 parallel universes ahead of you. Not 3, not 4, just 2.
Yeah, we cut that part out, but
I'll allow it.
Okay, so the January 6th thing, does anyone have any thoughts on what happened last night?
I only got about 30 minutes into the hearing, but it was interesting seeing people who were part of Trump's cabinet and, his administration come forward and give their points of view and what they had to say about the events leading up to and resulting from January 6th.
I did not
Now-
see any of the hearings, so I'll just save my thoughts for later when we talk about it in general.
Yeah,
Darth?
I also didn't watch it, so no opinion.
All
John?
right.
It's just a kind of
And his mic is dying again.
Yeah, your mic is dying again, John, so I suppose I should take that as a cue to move on to our last scheduled topic.
Well, aren't we going to talk about? It's been a minute. Wait, we were doing the podcast. Wait, hold on. January 6th happened before we started doing Monarchist Minute, right?
Yeah, so we never actually had a chance.
yeah.
Okay, boys, let's do a let's talk about Jan 6 in general if and there's no objections. I mean, I'm looking forward to the totally civil discussion.
Okay, I will mention that January 6th, 2021 was, I think, the first time
Hello?
that a group of people protested at the Capitol building to essentially throw out electors from the Electoral College.
I mean, I'm sure there had to be other times where that happened because
There was one time that the Capitol building actually got bombed. There's been a few cases of someone actually managing to break in, storm the Capitol building, and do harm inside the Capitol building.
yeah,
But
but he's talking about specifically a protest
I think,
to throw out electors.
yes, I think this is specifically the first time that an incident has occurred directly resulting from an election.
All I'll say on that front is if they were trying to overthrow any government, they were doing a pretty terrible job at it.
Yeah.
Like they were doing a horrifyingly bad job at it.
The thing is, like, if you're unorganized, you're not going to do something like that. Like, that's the problem with all these people. Like, they just think, oh, we can just rise up spontaneously and overthrow the government. It's like, no, that's never gonna happen. That's
Yeah.
because unless you have like a leadership, you have an officer class leading you that can actually make decisions and
Because
move
yeah,
people around.
when you're like looking at the pictures, January, it was like a tourist. Like it was just a bunch of tourists walking there. Like it was just them being weird and like unorganized and stuff like that.
You see, when I went to DC, reflecting on my own experience, for when I went to the Capitol building, I think I only got to go. We walked in, we saw a ground floor. We obviously didn't get to go into where Congress sat and whatnot in the Senate. Somebody had a Capitol bill plushie that I wanted to buy, but unfortunately it wasn't for sale. Somebody actually made it so you couldn't just buy one, which is sad. But let's see. Yeah, it was. And then looking at some of the pictures, it looks like a whole bunch of people in the hallway. But other the like the more humorous pictures were just people obeying the little railings. Contrast that with some of the other pictures of a hallway packed like sardines. I wouldn't want to be there. And yeah, but but still.
I've actually been in the Capitol
So
building twice. Once when I was middle school trip, and once when I was 8. And when I was 8, I actually got a full tour. Got to see both the old House chamber, the
Yeah, I went there.
chamber, and the Senate. And all I have to say is, people really, the outside of the Capitol building does it no justice for how huge and borderline labyrinthine it is on the inside. Say the building is massive on the inside is an understatement. To say it'd be very easy to get lost if one didn't know what they were doing is also an understatement.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is, and we could talk about America's civil religion and other. But it is a inside the dome, I think, which is the old house, or the old where the Senate used to meet, I think. Sorry for any noise there. There's this giant mural of like Washington among the Roman pantheon. And I should have known right then and there that something was wrong, but the Americanism was still very strong at that point. Because it's just, I mean, the artist did a good job, but
Pieces of Washington, that's the name of the mural in the rotunda. Interesting fact, the rotunda isn't actually made of stone. It's a single piece of cast iron that's painted white.
The more you know. I didn't know they could build. I didn't know you could cast something that large. I would have liked to see the cast.
Well, I might be wrong about it being a single piece, but I know it's all cast iron. It's not stone. The rotunda.
Oh, that makes me sad.
So, but let's get back to the actual January 6th topic here, and let's just say that some of the details that came out last night were kind of jarring.
Such as
how apparently the Muriel Bowser and Nancy Pelosi were like, no, we don't want the guard here. And yet the guard is like, we're ready to be here if you need us. And they're like, no, we don't need you.
Oh, that's been known for a while. I think that Nancy Pelosi or somebody turned down the option to have more security on that day.
I was told Trump also turned down calling in the guard after the event had actually occurred.
Oh, I haven't heard that. But then again, I haven't been keeping up with this story as often as I should have, I guess.
Yet also just saying the National Guard is not just this spontaneous force that you can just call up at any period of time. You need several hours. I'd probably say give a good 3 days to actually assemble a force. So, yeah, there's no rapid response units in the National Guard. That's what I'm saying.
Does DC have its own National Guard?
Yes, it does.
But why though?
DC also has the Capitol Police.
Well, yeah, I know they have the Capitol Police, but DC's what, 500,000 people, and it's not a state. If DC was a state, I could see it having a National Guard. But the idea of
I actually take that back. The National Guard does have rapid response forces, but that's because the National Guard has special forces teams, and they're the only ones that can sometimes be called up at a moment's notice.
The Minutemen, these are not.
But
which is funny, given that the National Guards kind of grew out of those militia units.
but they were meant to be a Minutemen in like the 10-mile radius, not a statewide level.
But
So.
Well,
the whole thing with January 6th is it happened, and looking back on it, when it did happen, it was a shock. It was honestly a very spontaneous and surprising thing to happen. Because, when you hear a mob of people storm the Capitol building, that's not something that happens every day. But, looking back on it, I only regard the January 6th as the last act of basically chaos or political violence that basically happened throughout the entire 2020 election process. Of course, we have the infamous, as CNN called it, ironically, the Summer of Peace, which cities like Portland, Minneapolis, and Kenosha were toasted, and this actually goes into the social media posts. In my opinion, January 6th was the final political violence
You still with us?
in 2019.
Yeah, your
Will, are you
mic
still with
is
us?
Yeah, hello? Can you hear me now?
your mic is kind of falling periodically.
Okay, sorry.
Oh wait, now it's good. Okay.
All right, so where did I start cutting out?
The finals.
Yeah, but I view January 6th as the final, basically the grand finale of the absolute political, what you want to call it. I know you won't let me use
Shenanigans.
Yes, the political shenanigans that resulted in the 2020 election, and basically just the year 2020 in general. And in my opinion, the only thing significant or special about January 6th is where the act occurred. It wasn't nearly as destructive as the Minneapolis riot. It wasn't nearly as
Deadly.
controversial or violent as when the Portland riots, and they resulted in them trying to storm that federal building. But it did happen, and the only reason we remember it is not because it was massive or because it was super out of control, but because where it occurred and what was going on when it did occur. If it wasn't at the Capitol building, and if it wasn't during the certification of the election, January 6th would have just been another riot during the 2020 election cycle. But it was because where it was, when it was, and why it occurred that we mainly remember it. And of course, the context is important. But at the end of the
It's
day,
only because
just another riot.
it attacked our quote unquote sacred democracy, according to Nancy Pelosi. So that's the reason why it will be actually remembered, because the political class are entrenched on this idea that it's their 9/11 essentially.
Sacred democracy had basically been drugged through the mud through the entire 2020 election process, whether it be the DNC rigging their primary elections so Biden, of all people, could have actually won the primary, which, I mean, I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders, but even I have to admit he should have won the primary. He was polling better, he had the better...
Oh, not to mention the DNC. This is the second consecutive time the DNC Bernie.
Yes, this is the second time, and I think after they Clinton, nobody was buying it, and everyone was willing to call out the DNC. But conveniently, after primaries ended, and we started getting into the, of course, I ironically used the term again, summer of peace. People very, 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 very quickly swept the fact that Bernie intentionally got snubbed by the DNC under the rug because, everything happened in Minneapolis, and while we made the LA race riots look like a tea party for an entire summer,
Look. Okay. It just because you mess up, you intentionally rig the system against someone, doesn't mean that you're not actively participating in the democratic
Hey,
spirit.
remember, Susan is listening in, so word of warning.
Oh, okay.
Susan, how are you doing today?
Wait, who's Susan?
The CEO of YouTube. What's how do you say her last name? Her name is Mrs.
Was it Ski or something? It's Polish.
Yeah, I love Poland, but I can't pronounce her name. But
We
she's
would
an
have,
American.
we would have to get our resident Polish guy in here to
Well,
pronounce Susan's last name for us, but he's not in
oh,
our live audience right now, so we will.
and also because John's microphone is unfortunately playing funny, he is going to take his leave. So we will say take care and God bless to John.
Auf Wiedersehen, John.
All right, so
Anyways,
Good to know.
no. So I mean the whole thing with rigging the election, you know, whether it's the primaries or the
General,
general, the rigging is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, at the time, I still had it was really about that time that I started to become more and more a monarchist. I think I was involved in USAM at that point. But
just to let everyone know, the 2020 election and the aftermath of the 2020 election is precisely why I'm here.
I think that's actually the reason why we're here. The predecessing organization of MOA being USAM, which what Charles was talking about, was primarily created as a result of the 2020 election cycle. We are here because our organization, our movement, is a child of the chaos of the 2020 election.
yep.
And
So
prior to that, I was actually part of the Yang gang of all things. I was an Andrew Yang supporter.
Yang Bucks.
I would kind of say I'm one of the older monarchists around here. I just kind of always been an intellectual monarchist at heart. I don't know, like I've always kind of had that inclining, and only in like the last 3 years have I actually been able to vocalize it and actually like come to realize that, oh, I do realize that monarchy is the best solution. That's why I write monarchs as like the best people in my fiction. It's just very subconscious. Like it's a dispensation as a do any of you watch Academic Agent?
No, unfortunately, you've recommended him, but I have yet to.
If you're on the reactionary right, I recommend Academic Agent. But he has pretty much come to the conclusion that it's a dispensation of people. You are predisposed to having that inclining of being right wing, like being a monarchist or being a reactionary.
I mean, it is natural.
Our Polish guy is actually here now, so I've invited him up here so he can actually say the last name of the YouTube CEO when he gets it. when he gets up here. There we go. Polish guy, unmute yourself and pronounce her last name for us.
Wojcinski. Wojcicki. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, now you can now you can go. Go. Sorry, mate.
You token Polish man.
There we go. You see, we are you see Susan or Mrs. Lozinski. I really should. I had this bad habit that I picked up from my parents because they would never introduce adults as their
polls.
huh.
I said our poll is more based in her polls.
Well, I don't know. I had this bad habit that I kind of picked up from my parents because they would always introduce adults by their first name as opposed to their last name, which I should have been addressing them with since I was the little tyke. But you know, Mrs. Lozinski. You see, we here at Monarchists of America are a diverse group. We have Michiganians. We have Marylanders. We have Poles. We have British people. We are a diverse show, and I want you to know that we support diversity. And
True
please don't kill
diversity.
us.
Okay, so with that being said, I
What?
think it's
What did we? I was going on about democracy, wasn't I? Oh yeah. Oh, natural inclination. There we go. Okay. No, I mean, I think that now that I think about it, monarchism is natural. I mean, I always had that necessarily, I guess, idea of wanting the good guys, being kings and stuff. Uh, you know, I I guess the Americanist, republic is uber good. My earliest conscious political thought when it comes to monarchy was certain groups of people, like the Chinese or whatever, or certain groups of like different, like, I guess, ethnicities or countries. I would call it countries at the time. Would lean towards different kinds of governments, and those different kinds of governments would be good for them. So I thought, the Chinese would always tend towards authoritarianism because they've always had an authoritarian. Because at least recently, they've always had. At the time, I would have assumed they always had an authoritarian government, and that the British would be constitutional monarchy because obviously that's a very dumb idea now. But I was 11, cut me some slack. But I don't think I was ever actively opposed to monarchy in of itself. Um, for certain people, I never would have wanted it here until recently, but I was never. I think that I still had that natural inclination to a that sort of family governance that monarchy represents, even if I wasn't consciously aware of it. I don't know. Did you guys ever have that? And then this whole craziness made you realize it?
And I've always sort of flirted with the idea of monarchism because I was a big history geek and I loved playing strategy games. Growing up, and of course, most strategy games that take place in a setting have you play as basically I think I was the LARPing monarchist from a very, very, very young age, but as I grew up and became more cynical about the government system, it matured into a more proper monarchism.
Else have any thoughts on January 6th and
All I gotta say is, once the trial's done, whatever it may be, mark my words, the Democratic Party is never, ever, ever going to stop milking this cow. No matter if it's still producing milk or not, they are never, ever, ever gonna let this die.
all
Too
right.
many
Thank you for that.
something major changes, they're still going to be talking about January 6th.
And of course, just one last thing to bring up with the Supreme Court. And I know we're running a little bit short here, but I want to make sure we get this in. The Supreme Court has determined in a case on Wednesday that you are not allowed to sue a Border Patrol agent for excessive force. This is a case that the Supreme Court thought was more important to release the result of than Dobbs, the landmark case of this generation.
And to be frank, it's honestly hogwash because once again, the Supreme Court establishes that law enforcement cannot be held accountable or be forced to do their job in this country, which is hogwash.
All right. Does anybody else have any thoughts on the, I believe it was called the
Egbert
Egbert?
v. Boule?
Yes. Does anyone else have any thoughts on Egbert?
Certain letters do not belong after certain other letters, and when it comes to making a name, e.g.,
There was a King Egbert in England.
Well, yeah, but that was
No.
back when English was like that. English is not like that anymore. This is
Yeah.
after the great vowel shift.
All right,
Also,
Darth.
Wait,
before we finish, too, many prayers for the great Catholic monarch King Ludwig II of Bavaria.
oh, yep. Well, I guess we'll pray for his soul when we get to the prayers. Right? Are we?
Yeah, we are good to wrap up. So, for those of you listening to us on YouTube, first of all, welcome. We record our podcast Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern in our Discord server, link to which can be found in our description, as well as a link to all of the Monarchist of America social media platforms, including our Twitter, Facebook, and Gab as well as our Instagram. And a link to Darth Kilburn's YouTube channel, as well as to Counter Revolution's YouTube channel, and info on the Order of Augustus will also be in the description of this YouTube video. And if you made it this far in the comments section, I would like you to post your favorite monarch, not including Jesus Christ. And this is for the YouTube people, not our live audience. All right, Charles,
Yeah.
let us pray.
All right.
Actually, do you mind if I lead us in prayer? I
Of
found
course, Darth.
Okay.
All right. In nomine Patre et Filii Spiritus Sancti. O Lord, grant to all kings and rulers health, peace, concord, stability, that they may administer the government you may have given them without failure. For you, O heavenly Master, King of the ages, give the sons of men glory and honor and authority over all things that are on this earth. Lord, direct their counsel according to what is good and pleasing in your sight. The administering the authority you have given them in peace and gentleness with godliness, they may continue to please you. You alone are able to do these things, and things far greater than these for us. We pray you, through the high priest and guardian of our souls, Jesus Christ. Through him be glory and majesty to you, both now and for all generations, forever and ever. Amen. In nomine Patre et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
Right. Until next week. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.